yet it could not escape notice. A woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying this, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay hands on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears. He spat and touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven. He sighed and said to him, "Ephata," which is "be open." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Please be seated. So, the Syrophoenician woman. This is one of those weeks that, pastors kind of like to take some liberties with the text and maybe not preach on what the lectionary is giving us to preach on. Unfortunately, since we're about to start a Sunday school curriculum that's based on the lectionary, that's not really an option. So, the Syrophoenician woman. Let me tell you, I've been reading about this week. I spent most of yesterday, well not most of, but at least a solid hour yesterday reading. There's a whole chapter dedicated to her in Rhodes' book on Mark's. Rhodes' book on Mark, not Mark's, that's the other guy. It's actually one of the most pivotal stories in the Gospel of Mark. And to understand it, we need to put it back in the context of the entire Gospel and understand what's happening. Understand what's going on in the text. And once we understand that, it suddenly makes sense why it's paired with James. Because as things stand, there seems to be some conflicting going on in our Gospels. We have James who's saying, "You shall not show favoritism," and then we have this really troublesome passage where Jesus says to a woman, because of her nationality and her station in life, that she's a dog. It's an uncomfortable truth of the Gospel. And it's there. And I'm going to put it out and name the elephant in the room, as Pastor Dave is so good at doing, and say that it happens. So what's really going on in this text? Jesus is in a foreign land. And he's been there before. Jesus has been in a foreign land before one other time in Mark. Towards the beginning of his ministry, he crosses the Sea of Galilee, he goes to the Decapolis, and he said, I know I'm not saying that right, don't stop looking at me funny. And he says to a man who is possessed by a legion of demons to be cleansed. He casts out a legion of demons. Remember, this is the really dramatic story where he casts them out into the herd of pigs, and they all run over the edge of the cliff into the sea and they die. Well, the people living in this foreign land are not very pleased with this miracle. All right? The man is. He runs away and proclaims Jesus, and what and says, yeah, you need to leave now because we don't know what to do with you. And yeah, you need to go away. So Jesus does. He goes away. He goes away, he goes about his business in Galilee, continuing to work among the Jews and proclaiming his miracles. And then for some reason, in chapter 7, right around the middle of the book of Mark, he crosses into foreign land again. And we don't know why. We don't know if it was to make sure that this story happened. Mark's Jesus tends to be a very human Jesus, a Jesus that changes his mind, a Jesus that feels pain, a Jesus that looks for other options and that is growing and learning. Mark's Jesus tends to not be the Jesus that we like to think about from John, that has everything all together. I like to think that the two Gospels, the earliest one written and the latest one written, they kind of sandwich, they kind of show both sides. In Mark, you see the humanity of God. In John, you see the divinity. And by reading them together, we get some kind of glimpse of the truth. But Jesus has gone into this foreign land. We don't know why. And he has withdrawn into a house, and we don't know why. Maybe he's trying to take a break. Maybe he's burnt out and he's tired, and he wants to have a little retreat. Maybe he remembers that they didn't like him so much the last time he left the country, and so he's trying to keep a low profile. Maybe the heat is getting too much from the religious authorities within Galilee, and he's trying to let things cool down. We don't know. It's all speculation. What we do know is that Jesus could not keep a low profile. We know that immediately, as things happen in Mark, immediately a woman who is desperate approaches him. A Syrophoenician woman, a foreigner. Someone who is referred to by the Jewish community as a dog. This isn't Jesus' term. He's using the common vernacular of the time. It doesn't make it any less insulting. But Jesus, she approaches him for help. She kneels at his feet. And Jesus says, "It is not right to take the food away from the children and give it to the dogs." Which means, I've come to help the Jewish people now, not you. I've seen those dogs. If you've ever traveled to a less developed nation, you probably have too. They are bone thin, covered in mange. They are frightening looking and frightened. They hunch their shoulders and they crawl into spaces that they are not welcome. Places like schools and churches. Where people, if you're ever in Honduras, this is how you deal with the dogs in Honduras. You go, and the dogs run away. Now this is a helpful thing to know in Honduras because the dogs also carry disease and other things like that. Ask me about my backstory, I'll tell you all about how I feel about animals carrying disease. But I have seen those dogs, and I have seen those children. I have seen those dogs eat the children's crumbs. I will never forget sitting in the classroom in La Cañada, Honduras, watching the children eat their one meal of the day and picking bits of food out of their bowl and throwing it to the dogs. Granted, it was mostly broccoli they were throwing to the dogs, and even starving children in less developed nations don't want to eat their vegetables. But I can't shape the image. The woman says, yes, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's feet. And this statement changes the Gospel of Mark. Because this statement means, says, advocates that the gospel of God that Jesus is here to proclaim, the good news, the love of God, is not constrained by any limits we put upon it. And even God himself, Jesus, does not limit where God's love may go. That's a scary thing to say. Because that means there is no boundary. There is no edge. There is no box. And we as human beings, we love boxes. We thrive with boxes. It's how we identify and understand. One of my favorite TV programs is National Geographic. It's Taboo. And it's looking at what's normal for one culture but taboo for another. And it challenges me to think about, oh, maybe that could be normal under a different set of circumstances in a different place and time. And I just watched the one on outcasts. I just watched it yesterday, actually, thinking about this sermon. And it reminded me that so often we make outcasts of people because we think we are acting on that age-old imperative of protecting ourselves. I need to identify whether or not you are a threat, and I do that by looking at you. I do that by looking at how you're dressed, how you behave, how you speak, how you walk. Are you like me? Are you different from me? Are you a threat to me? Can I trust you? Should I let you in? All of those things, hardwired survival instincts in humanity. And yet we are challenged to overcome that instinct. And this is where we link up with James. We are challenged to look at a person not by their outside, not by their situation or circumstance, but to see them as having the one identifying feature that we share with all humanity, and that is as a child of God. The healing of the Syrophoenician woman breaks the gospel out of the Jewish community and into the greater world. After this, he's going to heal a man. He's going to go back to that place where they kicked him out before. That place I can't say, so I'm not going to try. But he's going to go back there. He's going to heal another person, and they're going to get really excited about it this time. And then, a few verses later, he's going to do that whole feeding the thousands thing that he did in Galilee. He's going to do that again on foreign soil. His love flows out and includes and embraces everyone. And we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid of each other. We don't have to be afraid that the identity of one person threatens our own identity. You don't have to look like me for me to still be me. I can like things that you don't like, and we are still children of God together. We don't have to look and be the same to know that we belong to one family. But we do need to look at each other and hear what we have to say. We do need to find that person who is on the margins of our radar. That person who is hard for you to listen to. Maybe it's someone older than you or younger than you. Maybe it's someone who holds a position of authority that you're rebelling against. Maybe it's someone who's rebelling against your authority. Maybe it's that person who dresses differently than everybody else. Or the person who can't quite speak and act like everyone else because they're dealing with some kind of disorder or addiction. Maybe it's the person who can't afford to take a shower every day or wash their clothes every week. Maybe it's the person who you made judgments about. We all have our favorites. We all make those things, and we all put people in boxes. But today, our gospel and our Bible reading implore us to look beyond those boxes, to see each other as God sees us, His children, not in and out, but one, and to treat each other like family, meaning we want good things for each other. Meaning, if someone in your family came to you and said, I am hungry, I am cold, I am lonely, are you going to say, God be with you, go in peace? You're going to wrap a blanket around them. You're going to find some food. You're going to hug them and hold them and say, I'm sorry, I can't fix it, but I want to be here with you. That's what James calls us to do, and that's what Jesus lifts up in his sacrificial prayer. Is to be present with each other as family. Truly and deeply caring. And I will be the first to admit that we don't always get that right. I don't always get that right. Those hard-wired instincts, yeah, they get the better of me more times than I'm counting with. That's where the whole grace and forgiveness. Remember that part at the beginning of the service where Pastor Dave said you are forgiven of your sins? Well, you're forgiven. And guess what? You will be again next week. So that means this week you have the freedom to try. Even if you fail. You have the freedom to try. In a few minutes, we're going to see a baptism. We're going to welcome a new member in the family. Shortly after that, we're going to come to the table together and share a meal. Remembering that God doesn't play favorites. He died for all of us. He rose for all of us. And the promise that we are His eternally is for all of us. So live like you are surrounded by your family. Especially when the family is challenging.